Ever have one of those days where, as you're sliding into your desk at work, you think to yourself, man, I wish I was back in yeshiva where I learned and I steiged all day and now I spend most of my day working? Or you ever think to yourself while you're changing your 7th diaper, gosh, I wish I was back in seminary where my life was filled with chesed and tefillah and Torah, and now it's filled with diapers and spaghetti and glitter? Ever find yourself sort of nostalgically recalling the times you were on a spiritual high surrounded by rebbeim and Torah and learning and tefillah, and now you're not? And now you find yourself sort of slowly developing a small but growing guilt in your heart that your best spiritual days are behind you? I want to share with you a perspective that I think can radically change the way you think, because not only is that way of thinking wrong, it's dangerously wrong. Now, this perspective I want to share with you comes from the word Vayikra. The word Vayikra means a loving call. Rashi writes it's a lashon of chiba. It was Hashem's sort of call of endearment when he called Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was sort of on a speed dial relationship with Hashem. He spoke to him daily, and every single time Hashem spoke to Moshe, says the Sifra, he first called out to him with a Vayikra. He would lovingly call out his name. Now, even though Hashem would call out Vayikra every time he spoke to Moshe, the Torah only writes the word in 3 places. The first time, when Hashem first introduced himself to Moshe at the sneh, the burning bush, it says in Vayikra Gimel Daled, Vayikra Elav Elokim mitoich hasneh, Vayemer Moshe Moshe Vayemer Hineni. And the second time was at the top of Har Sinai before Hashem gave Moshe the Torah, where the pasuk says in Yud Tes Gimel, Vayikra to Moshe. The third time was now, when Hashem spoke to Moshe in his tent. Now here's the question. If every time Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, it was preempted by a Vayikra, why is it written in the Torah in only 3 places? So you either write it every time or don't write it at all. Why write it specifically in these 3 instances? So the Reb Shamshon of Hirsch gives the following explanation. The Torah specifically writes the word Vayikra at the sneh, at the top of Har Sinai before Kabbalas Torah, and in front of Moshe's tent to teach us a very specific lesson. And that is that at any and every scenario in our lives, Hashem will always be there, lovingly calling to us. At a lonely bush in the middle of a deserted desert, on top of Har Sinai at the most pivotal spiritual moment in world history, or on a run-of-the-mill day at home, Hashem will be there calling, waiting for our relationship. From the low points to the high points, from the middle of Yom Kippur to the middle of Camp Color War to the middle of giving your triplets a bath, Hashem is there calling. He wants a relationship with us. He lovingly wants us to love him, no matter where, no matter what, no matter when. We don't leave Hashem when we walk out of shul to go home. He's just as much in our homes as he is in shul. We don't leave Hashem when we leave seminary or yeshiva or kollel to go to work. Not only is he also at work, he's the one who brought us to work. He's the one who found our job. He's the one who arranged that we met that guy who suggested the idea to us. Hashem wants us to be there. Hashem is there. You better believe he's going to be there watching. He's lovingly watching to see if we can inject holiness into the mundane, and spirituality into the physicality, and meaning into the seemingly meaningless. This is exactly like what we say in Musaf every Yontif. In the Musaf davening of Yontif, when we're davening for the future return of the Beis HaMikdash and for Klal Yisrael to be returned to its original glorious state of Kedusha, we say the following line. We say, V'hashiv kayanim la'avaydasam, u'leviyim l'shirim l'zimram, v'hashiv Yisrael l'nveyin. We daven that Hashem should return the Kayanim to the Beis HaMikdash, where they can duchen, and we ask Hashem to return Leviyim to the Beis HaMikdash, where they can sing Shira. And then we say, V'hashiv Yisrael l'nveyin. We ask Hashem to bring us back to the days that the Yisraelim would go back to their homes. The word l'nveyin means homes. Now, isn't that strange? Why exactly are we begging Hashem to bring us back to the times when the Yisraelim would go back to their houses after leaving the Beis HaMikdash? What does that even mean? I understand the glory of the Kohanim duchening and the Leviyim singing. What exactly is so glorious about the regular people going home to their houses? Aren't they just going back to their houses after Yontif was over? Doesn't that mean the holiness is over? The Kedusha is over? The party's over? The answer is that when the Yidden were Oila L'Regel, sometimes incredibly long distances, to join the Yom Tov festivals in Yerushalayim, it was more than just a month-long vacation in the holy city and then our eventual return to quote-unquote normal life. The entire point of going up to Yerushalayim was to use the trip as a means to infuse holiness within you and then bring that holiness back to your home and plant it there. The litmus test in determining how sincere one was with attaching themselves with the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash was how enthusiastically they brought that Kedusha back to their homes, back to their farms, back to their desk at the accounting firm. So when we beg Hashem to return to the days of Yidden walking back to our homes, what we mean is return us back to the times when we were able to see the holiness of Hashem in a shul, or a yeshiva, or a mishkan, or a Beis HaMikdash, and bring it with us wherever we go, because that's what real Avodas Hashem is. Sometimes we let out a sigh as we walk into the office and we nostalgically remember those golden days in seminary filled with Torah and Tefillah and Chesed, and we let out a sigh as we pull up to another unit of multifamily duplexes as the property manager, and we remember those golden days in yeshiva filled with learning and davening and growth, or those days in Kaila where we blissfully swam through the sea of halacha, and we sigh and we tell ourselves, those were the days, and we sort of groggily stumble on through life. The word Vayikra tells us that this way of thinking is a mistake. At every stage we have our very own Vayikra. At every step of our journey through life, Hashem is calling us. He is there waiting to see if we live for Him on fire, if we serve Him no matter where and no matter what and no matter when. Whether you're in a kitchen or in an office or in a middle seat on a low-budget airline, there's no place on earth that has more or less potential for Kedusha. Every place we have is a place waiting for us to be Mekadesh. Sometimes being Mekadesh the place means you learn 3 hours straight in a base medrash. And sometimes being Mekadesh the place means you bench with Kavana even though you're in a train station. Perhaps your entire tafkid that day was to be Mekadesh that train station. Perhaps your entire tafkid that year was to be Mekadesh that train station. Perhaps your entire tafkid in your life is to be Mekadesh that train station. And all those years in yeshiva and in seminary and in Kailo were just to prepare you for that train station. It's exactly like this story. There was once a Yid named Menachem, who decided one year that he was going to give this upcoming Rosh Hashanah his very all. He was going to knock it out of the park. He was going all out during davening. He's going to cry. He's going to sing. He's going to coronate Hashem like Hashem's never been coronated before. And so he makes all the great preparations for the day, and he goes to the mikveh twice, and he puts on his brand new suit with his brand new cufflinks and his brand new shoes, and he proudly marches into shul with his brand new machzor, and he walks over to his seat, only to find that Yankel, the town Nebuch, decided to sit right next to him. I can't believe this, Menachem said. I cannot believe this. Of all the people in the entire show, I have to sit next to Yankel. He stinks. He's loud. He makes weird noises. He shuckles in weird ways. He wears shoes that haven't been in style since the 1970s. He's forever blowing his nose. I just cannot believe this. And so the entire Rosh Hashanah, Menachem is quieting Yankel, and he's frowning at Yankel, and he's shushing Yankel, and he's telling everybody how unfortunate he is that he has to sit next to Yankel. And after Rosh Hashanah was over, Menachem goes over to his Rebbe, and he says, Rebbe, I don't understand. I did my very best. I made all the right preparations. I went to the mikveh 3 times. I learned all the words of davening beforehand. Why did Hashem let Yankel ruin my Rosh Hashanah? And the Rebbe stroked his beard and he turned to Menachem and he said, my dear Menachem, you got it all wrong. You think it was Yankel who chose to sit next to you? You think it was Yankel who wanted you to sit next to Yankel? You think it was Yankel who wanted you to have to endure Yankel? Menachem, you got it all wrong. It was Hashem who wanted you to sit next to Yankel. Because some years Hashem wants us to be mamlechim by davening and singing His praise, and some years He wants nothing more than for us to be nice and loving to Yankel. Your entire Rosh Hashanah this year, your Malchias, your Shayfres, your Zechreines, your way of being mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu this year was Yankel, and you blew it. Our Avodas Hashem is very much the same way. Sometimes we think, if only I was back in Kail or in Yeshiva or in seminary, then I'd be filled with Kedusha, then I'd serve Hashem well. This is a mistake. Sometimes Hashem wants us to serve Him in the Beis Medrash, and sometimes Hashem wants us to serve Him in an airport. Sometimes Hashem wants us to serve Him in shul, and sometimes He wants us to serve Him at Home Depot. Sometimes Hashem wants us to serve Him by giving kavod and respect to our Rebbeim and Rabbanim, and sometimes He wants us to be careful to respect Yankel. There is not a scenario in which Hashem isn't by our side, watching and hoping that we make Him proud. From bagel stores to mountaintops to the crawl space in your attic, He is there knocking on your door, waiting for you to let Him in. But I want to add another layer to this. Not only is there just as much potential for spiritual growth in the places beyond the walls of the Beis Medrash or shul or seminary, there may even be more potential. Let me explain. So Hashem once took Moshe Rabbeinu on a VIP tour of Shemayim, and he's showing him around, and he shows Moshe his heavenly throne. And the Torah describes what Moshe saw. The Torah in Mishpatim Chaf Daled Yud says that the throne was made out of livnas hasapir, sapphire bricks. Now, what exactly does that mean? What is that about? So Reb Hirsch explains that Hashem specifically constructed his throne out of bricks to symbolize that his very throne is made out of the bricks and mortar of life. It symbolizes that Hashem doesn't want us to serve him only in the absolutely perfect conditions in our energetic 20s, in the perfect yeshiva with the perfect chavrus on a perfectly sunny spring day after we've had the perfectly brewed cup of coffee. He wants us to serve him with passion and joy when it's hard, when the baby woke up in the middle of the night, and on our way to Shachris, your coffee spilled on your shirt, and your first client hung up on you. And he wants to see us serve him even then, when the rest of the family went to Ne'ilah, but you had to stay home to watch the baby. He wants to see us want to serve him even then. He wants to see us serve him specifically then, because that's the test of a true warrior. A real soldier is not someone who shows up on the battlefield only when it's sunny and only on days they had a perfect breakfast. No. Real soldiers show up when it's freezing cold, when they had nothing but a rice cake for breakfast, when they're not in the mood, and they have a splitting headache, and yet like a real warrior, they show up to the battlefield ready to fight. That's what Hashem wants in us. Warriors who do battle no matter where our life takes us. It's like friendship. All friends show up to Varts, but great friends are there early, and they stay late, and they texted people to make sure everyone shows up. All friends show up to Shiva houses. But real friends are there the day after Shiva, when everybody left, and they swing by to bring some lunch and bring a smile. All friends visit their friends when they're diagnosed with cancer and he's in the hospital. Real friends are there 6 months later in the Cleveland Clinic when it's Shem Gedalia and you drove from Passaic and it was raining. You had 3,000 other things you'd rather do and you have a splitting headache and you show up and you're fasting and you've got there and your friend is sleeping and you sat there by his bedside, unflinching, unmoving, crying and saying Tehillim over his sleeping body, waiting 3.5 hours for him to wake up just so you could be there to smile at him. Because that's what real friends do. Avodas Hashem is the same way. Hashem wants to see us choose him when it's hard, when no one's looking, when the curtain closes and the lights in the Beis Medrash turn off. Those are the moments that count. So important is Avodas Hashem when there's no glamour and glitz, that Hashem literally designed the entire calendar in order for us to serve him for real. The Jewish year is 354 days long. Out of those 354 days, a whopping 172 of them are days of significance. There's something going on. There's a Lag BaOmer, there's a Shavuos B'Tammuz, a Chol HaMoed, a Chanukah, a Reish Chayit, Pesach. Now what's strange is that of those 172 days where there's something going on, 127 of them are in the spring and summer between Pesach and Sukkot. The 6 months before Pesach in the fall and the winter, there's almost nothing going on. And before the Chanukah and Purim story, there was mamish nothing going on. Cheshvan, nothing. Kislev, nothing. Teves, nothing. Shvat, nothing. Adar, nothing. Why did Hashem set it up that way? Why did he set up our calendar where there are 6 months of nonstop action, every other week there's something going on, and then 6 months of just silence? Why didn't you spread it out a little bit? The answer is that Hashem wants to give us time in the year where we choose Hashem by ourselves. He wants to see us dance when it's not Simchas Torah. He wants to see us daven when it's not Ne'ilah. He wants to see us learn when it's not Shavuos night. Hashem wants to see that we know how to serve him when it's a random Tuesday in December, when we can show Hashem that we are on his team, ready to choose him, even when it's cold outside, even when it's raining outside, even when there's no lights and there's no music and there's no action. It's just a regular day waiting for us to make it holy, because that's what Avodas Hashem is all about. Showing Hashem that you're willing to put in skin in the game. Learning, davening, giving tzedakah when it's easy, it's one thing. Doing it when it's hard is a whole nother thing. It's the real thing. Now you see this concept literally codified in Shulchan Aruch. There's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, originally introduced by a Gemara in Brachos, Daf Nun Aleph on the base, and it says that the concept of tadir v'she'eno tadir, tadir kaidim. The halacha is that when two mitzvahs or halachic obligations fall upon a person simultaneously, they collide. The mitzvah that occurs more frequently is more tadir, comes first. For example, you have a mitzvah to make Havdalah Motzei Shabbos, and at the same time, a mitzvah to light the Chanukah menorah. So the halacha is that we say Havdalah first because it occurs more frequently. It is more tadir. Now, let's think about that for a second. Does that make any sense? Shouldn't it be the exact opposite? Shouldn't the mitzvah that comes only once a year be so precious to us that we run to do it first? Shouldn't its infrequency make it more special? Why does the mitzvah that come more frequently take precedence over the mitzvah that comes only once a year? The answer is that that's precisely the point. The mitzvah doesn't take precedence because of the fact that it comes all the time. It doesn't take precedence despite that. It takes precedence precisely because of it. Precisely because the mitzvah is more frequent, it's more special in the eyes of Hashem. It's the mitzvah that you do week in and week out, month in and month out. It's a mitzvah that requires consistency. It's a mitzvah that requires self-motivation and work. It's a mitzvah that demands your commitment and enthusiasm. It gets no emotions. It gets no special musical albums about it. Nobody's circling it on their calendar. It's often overlooked and underappreciated. Hashem says, those are the ones that come first. Tadir kaidim, because on life's ladder, those are the ones that make up the most rungs. Those are the ones that sparkle in my eyes. Those are the ones that separate the men from the boys. Those are the mitzvahs that show Hashem we really choose Him, because that's what Hashem really wants. People who choose Him when life's a little bit uncomfortable, when we're not in an air-conditioned base medrash, when there's no fanfare for what we're doing. Of course Hashem wants us to have that new Shana Rishona couple for Shabbos, where they bring the perfect gift, and they're funny and cute, and adorable, and they help clean, and they help serve. You know what Hashem wants even more? To have that nebuch who lives down the block, who never gets invited out, who smells, who doesn't bring a gift, who is far from cute. Of course Hashem wants us to stay after shul and say shalom aleichem to our friend from yeshiva who became a Rosh Kollel and he married some huge rich gvir from Chicago's daughter and he's visiting. Of course. You know what Hashem wants even more? To say good Shabbos to the nebuch, to the guy that's divorced, to the guy who's on his sixth job, to the guy who can't tuck in his shirt. Of course, Hashem wants us to learn when we had the perfect amount of sleep and the perfect amount of coffee and the perfect day at work and the weather is perfect. You know what He wants even more? To see us learn when we had a rough night's sleep, when our coffee spilled, when we had a horrible day at work, and we had a pounding headache and we had to leave work early to show up and we're literally losing money to go learn with our chavrusa. And like a warrior, we block everything out and we sit down and learn. That's what Hashem wants. Of course, Hashem wants us to have patience with our kids on a perfect Sunday afternoon when everyone's well-fed and the kids all have friends over. You know what He wants even more? To see us keep our cool on Asara B'Teves when the house is a wreck and your kids are throwing schnitzel and you have a pounding headache and the house is a disaster and the kids are starving and there's 2 meshulachim at the door and everyone is screaming and the world is falling apart and you still keep your cool. Of course Hashem wants us to hold our tongue and not say Lashon Hara about our friend who we like anyway and he davens in the same shul as us and he drives the same car as us and he validates us. Of course Hashem doesn't want us to say Lashon Hara about him. But you know what He wants even more? To not say Lashon Hara about that Kollel guy who just moved in, who we can't stand, who we think is too frum, who makes us feel insecure about our own ruchnius, and we want so badly to put him down to make ourselves feel better, and yet we don't. And that is called choosing Hashem. That's where the big bucks are. That's where the schar is. That's what separates the men from the boys. Now listen to this story. Not long ago, I was in the city of Bangkok, Thailand. Now, Bangkok, Thailand is one of the most chaotic and crazy and hectic cities in the world. There's floating markets and elephants and people eating snakes, and you have people driving Rolls Royces crashing into people riding donkeys, and you have entire families riding together on a bike. You have people selling fruits and vegetables that look like they're grown in another planet. It makes New York look like sleepy Monticello. And so I'm walking down the street, and you can imagine my surprise when I see a Jew walking down the street towards me. From a mile away, you can tell this guy's Jewish. And so I go over to him and I say, Shalom Aleichem, how are you, Rabbi Yid? What are you doing here? And so he looks at me with a slightly sad face and he says, I'm running away. So I said, what's a guy like you running away to Bangkok, Thailand? And he looked at me and he sighed and he said, well, I recently got divorced and I'm running away because my wife hates me and my kids hate me. And so I flew off to Bangkok and this is where I'm roaming the streets. And I said, I'm really sorry to hear that. And he turns to me and he says, yeah, I just don't get it. I just don't understand. I did so many big things for them. I took them all to Disneyland. I took them to Europe. I bought them fancy presents. I bought my daughter a car. I bought my son World Series tickets. I bought my wife a $20,000 necklace. How could they hate me like this? Okay, true, I was a grouch more often than not, and I hit them from time to time, and I probably didn't give them the positive attention that they needed, but look at all the big things I did for them. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And this man walks off into the streets of Bangkok. You know what this guy didn't understand? That deep down, nobody cares about the big things. About the massive trips, about the massive presents, about the World Series tickets, about the $20,000 necklace. Nobody cares. People want the small things, the constant love, the validation, the being there through the thick and the thin, for the attention you give them even when they know you've got other things going on, of the celebrating of the milestones, even the small ones, especially the small ones. That's what people really want. Hashem is the same way. Of course it's nice to learn on a Hoshana Rabbah night, but Hashem wants to see us learn on a Tuesday in December when it's raining outside. Of course he loves our davening during Ne'ilah, but Hashem wants to see us daven and cry when it's not Ne'ilah. He wants to see us dance when it's not Simchas Torah and learn when it's not Shavuos night and ask people for Mechila when it's not Elul. He wants to see us conquer the small stuff. The smallest thing in the entire world is an atom. The most powerful force in the entire world is an atom bomb. Is that a coincidence? Of course it's not, because greatness is the sum total of mastering a million small things. That's how you become great. It's like when Gordon Ramsay, one of the best chefs in the world and one of the most successful restaurant owners in the world, when he was asked, what does he look for when he's hiring a new chef? He didn't say, I look at how they fillet a sea bass. He didn't say, I watch them sear a ribeye. You know what he said? He told them, I watch them make an omelet. You want to know why? Because I want to see my chefs who have the ability, who perfected the small things. Because the difference between a good restaurant and a great one aren't the big things. It's the small ones. It's exactly the same thing in Avodas Hashem. The difference between good Avodas Hashem and great Avodas Hashem isn't the big things. It's not the big events. It's not the big moments. It's the million small things. You know what happened to the thousands of other religions in the world history? They're gone. You know why? Because the moment life became too difficult for them, too inconvenient, they quickly moved on to something more convenient and less complicated. You know what the Jewish people did when life got hard, when we lived in fear, when we lived in ghettos, when we were living under constant threat? You know what we did? We got up and we roared. We kept on singing because that's who we are. We're a nation of people that conquered the small things. What was the single greatest invention in world history? I believe the single greatest invention or discovery in world history, the one that had the most impact on civilization, on humanity, the one that completely changed how the world operated, was the invention of the usage of electricity. A major discovery in the usage and the potential power of electricity was discovered by a man named Benjamin Franklin. You know how he did it? In June of 1742, in the city of Philadelphia, he went outside in the rain and he took a special type of kite that had a metal wire at the top of it, and he attached a metal key at the bottom of the string, and he flew it in the rain, waiting for the kite to get struck by lightning to see if he can harness the electricity. And he stood out there for hours in the rain, flying his kite during thunderstorms. He stood out there rainy day after rainy day after rainy day, waiting for his kite to find lightning. Anyone watching Benjamin Franklin thought he was an idiot. He's drenched, he's shivering, he's tired, but after persevering long enough, lightning struck, and he helped discover the single greatest scientific discovery in the history of the world. Not despite the fact that he went out in the rain, but precisely because of it. Precisely because he went out in the rain and stood in the cold while it was thundering and everyone's calling him a fool and his feet are drenched, and yet he stood out there unflinching and unwavering until he achieved scientific greatness. The Jewish people, invented the single greatest spiritual invention in the history of the world, and that's called monotheism. We invented Kedusha and Dveikus and real, genuine spirituality. And you know how we did it? Because we stood out in the rain. Because we never stopped singing. We kept on choosing Hashem no matter what and no matter when, because that's our secret. We don't give up on our ruchnius just because we went out to work and are no longer in the Beis Medrash all day. We don't give up on spirituality the minute we left seminary. We don't give up on ruchnius just because our days that used to be filled with tefillah and Torah are now filled with diapers and spaghetti and Excel sheets. We don't give up on our ruchnius just because the people at work think that we're crazy. We don't give up on ruchnius no matter where we are, because we know that we could be anywhere in the world at any time and at any place, and Hashem will be there with our very own Vayikra knocking on our door. Our job is just to open the door.